Sara Haj-Hassan. Okay, the session is being recorded, it just told us. So Sara is the partnerships manager at Tarjimly, which is a free on-demand language access app. And she holds a master's of social welfare degree with a focus on management and planning from UC Berkeley. She's passionate about social justice and about collaborating with diverse communities to design programs that increase equitable access and well-being. So we're delighted that you're here, Sara. It looks like you've got a big crowd looking to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining today. I hope this is useful. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. There we go. Can everybody see my screen right now? I'm just going to move this. Awesome. So I'm just going to dive right in because today's presentation is going to probably take up the full hour, especially if I want you all to be able to try language access at the end of this. So I will start. First of all, I'm going to go over a little bit about what we're going to talk about. First is just going over language justice. A lot of people don't think about interpretation and translation as a social justice issue. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll tell you a little bit more about Tarjimly, our organization, other options for accessing language access, and then how to download our free app. We'll go over safeguarding and confidentiality practices, which I'm sure that all of you are concerned with, especially since you're likely serving refugees, immigrants, asylum seekers, and other vulnerable populations. Then we will talk about best practices when using an interpreter, like best practices before starting a session, best practices during an interpretation session, and then we'll go over more of the practical aspects of how to use the app and how to share the app with your clients. So that's another thing of we're of course wanting to get this language access tool in the hands of people at organizations, but we also want refugees, immigrants themselves to have it on their phones so that they can use and access interpretation and translation when they need it. So if we have enough time at the end, we are going to try to test it out ourselves so you can actually play with the app and try it. I'm going to ask that people hold questions until the end unless there's something that is necessary in the moment, just so we can get through all the material. So first of all, I just wanted to talk about some issues that do arise from language barriers. So we might think of language barriers as kind of like a superficial problem, but really it impacts a lot of things. So it causes inequitable provision or access to services because people who need access to the services don't have equal opportunity to apply for things, to find out where they are, or if they go to an organization, people are like, well, we can't serve you because we can't speak the same language, etc. It also causes undue responsibility and stress placed on children of immigrants and refugees who might speak English, for example, but their parents don't. So they have to grow up really fast. And then also, sometimes it puts undue stress on them because you have to discuss topics that they shouldn't be exposed to at that age. It also can alter the child-adult dynamics and traditional kinship structures, especially in certain cultures where there's a big focus or stress on respecting elders, the dynamic between a child and a parent, between a grandparent and a child. When you put a child in that authoritative leadership position or not authoritative, position of authority, it can really alter those dynamics and cause some familial issues. I'm not saying it's all negative. I have friends who were, immigrants, the immigrant child, and had to interpret for their parents, and it actually really helped them develop and grow as people. So I don't want to give the wrong impression here, but these are some negative consequences that can arise from that. Also, rejected asylum cases. Basically, when you apply for asylum with the United Nations, if they cannot find interpreters for the language that you need, your asylum case is automatically rejected. So talk about inequitable provision of services. So on top of the fact that you're a minority that speaks a minority language, that you're at a further disadvantage because you do not speak the majority language there. And the list goes on and on. So as you can see, these are just a few issues arising from language barriers. And that's why we consider it a language justice issue, right? So the importance of language justice and access is we're saying that people should have the right to communicate in the language of their choice, and that it's essential to inclusive and multicultural community. When you don't have, a lot of times we talk about, having voices at the table and representation, and that's true, but these are literally like, we want to have those languages and voices at the table, and we can't if we don't have the language provision. We really see the intersectionality of language justice with racial and social justice as well. And really, language justice is only as strong as the resources you dedicate to it as an organization, or in terms of law. And we'll be talking about some federal laws that can help you a little bit later in this discussion. But we'll move on to who we are. So Tarjimly, we're a nonprofit organization, a 501c3 based out of Mountain View, California. We were founded in 2017 when the two co-founders, at the time they were formerly roommates at MIT, and at the time they were working in Silicon Valley at these tech companies, and they just felt really disheartened by everything going on. So there was like the Muslim ban, there was the Syrian refugee crisis, there was the border crisis, there's all these things happening. So they're like, oh, we want to go do something good. So they went to Greece to volunteer at a refugee camp there. While they were there, they were like, this is really bizarre. There are all these people who want to help, and they don't speak the same language as the people they're trying to help. But, we know people who speak Arabic, for example, like, let's get them on WhatsApp and let them help us out with this. And that's where the idea was born. They were like, why don't we crowdsource the millions of multilinguals around the world to provide free on-demand interpretation and translation for refugees, immigrants, asylum seekers, and anybody working with them or trying to support them. And that's where the idea came from. So what they noticed when they were on the ground at these refugee camps was that there were a couple of issues. So it's not that there wasn't any translation or interpretation. Just trying to move this little bar, 1 second. It wasn't that there wasn't any interpretation or translation, but there was either high cost and low coverage of remote interpretation services. So ones they could call on a phone, for example. It was like way too expensive to use all the time. Or you had to wait hours for these in-person interpreters who were excellent, but they're human, so they can't be in multiple places at once. So that was an issue as well, because people would be waiting for hours. Or you would gamble on Google Translate or family members. So the gambling on Google Translate, if any of you have used Google Translate to help you translate, especially non-Romance languages, you probably have a couple funny stories here and there about that. Or family, I've talked to someone yesterday who said they learned the hard way that, just because they're family, doesn't mean they're going to be a good source of interpretation, because especially when discussing private issues and stuff. So let me go next. I just wanted to give a few quotes by some top organizations on the importance of language access. If any of you are familiar with Translators Without Borders, they are actually a great resource for organizations that do a lot of translation. So they offer kind of lower cost translation services. I'm talking about like document translation than your average corporate translation company. And the idea of that is they only accept nonprofit organizations. So if you wanted to check them out, they're Translators Without Borders. They basically have groups of volunteers that translate documents and proofread them, but they've been in the field for a very long time. They're very professional. So if you're someone, again, who translates bulk documents and things like that, then I highly recommend checking them out as a language resource. They say that only 56% of refugees can understand the info they've been given. And then you have a shortage of female interpreters is a particular problem. You have the UNHCR that says that the complexity of working in multiple languages is a key challenge. And they know that because they have to reject these asylum cases if they don't have the languages necessary to serve them. So, and then the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent says that speakers of minority languages are more vulnerable when a crisis hits. And we've seen that even with organizations we've met with that deal with wildfires and floods and all these things, like they all often the communities that are the hardest hit are these immigrant communities as well. I told you already a little bit about us. We're a pretty diverse team that right now, post-COVID, we're not very large, but we're very diverse, and we're located in, I think last time I counted, 6 countries around the world. The mobile app, so Tarjimly is a mobile app. It connects you with a live translator in over 60 languages in an average of under 2 minutes, okay? The way we do that is we have these group of beneficiaries and humanitarians, so people needing language access. You sign up on our app, and then you filter for your language needs. So let's say English to Spanish, English to Pashto, whatever, English to Swahili. And then you click request translation. And when you click that, we have a machine learning algorithm, basically a smart code that takes into consideration a bunch of live factors, like, you know, what time zone is it right now in the country? Like which volunteers are awake? What is the language levels, the self-reported language levels of the volunteers? So we want to reach out to people who are either fluent or native in the languages first. Then we look at ratings on the app, take that into consideration into their score and whether or not they've taken our trainings and the probability with which they'll say yes based on historical data. So we take all that into consideration and then we sort them into what we call pools of translators. So we have our primary pool that we reach out to first, and that's in the first 30 seconds, we'll reach out to, let's say, 25 people, and they'll receive a little notification that says like, hey, somebody needs your help. Are you available? If in 30 seconds they don't answer, then we reach out to our pool number 2, and they receive notifications. So that being said, the longer you wait, the more people will reach out to, and the longer the people who receive the notification have to say yes and connect with you. I say this because we see a lot of people request wait 10 seconds and hang up. You're really not serving yourself well that way. So we recommend waiting at least 2 minutes and up to 5 minutes at least. And it's language dependent, right? So we have certain languages that are more popular on the app and where we have a lot of volunteers and the probability of connecting to someone's very high. And then we have some languages, Korean, you know, things like that, where the probability of connecting is really small because it's really hard to find speakers and speakers who can volunteer on the app. Once you're matched in a session, you can communicate via chat or texting, sending photos, sending voice notes, or getting on an internet call, okay? And all of that service, these are all of our base services, and they're all 100% free. Once you're done, you can end and rate your session. Now, I want to get people started because the best thing I have found that you can do in these workshops is actually get people started. I don't know if people can see the little bar that I see. Is it covering the screen for people? I'm going to assume not unless someone unmutes and says yes. So on your mobile devices, you're going to open your browser. So if, you know, that's like Safari, Firefox, Chrome, Explorer, whatever your phone has, you're going to open your internet browser and type in tarjimly.org/start. Okay, that's a smart URL. And what that means is it'll automatically take you to our app in your app store so you can download it. I'm just going to leave that up there for just a moment. So Tarjimly, in the meantime, I'll tell you what Tarjimly means. Tarjimly actually means translate for me in Arabic. And the root word, because Arabic is a language where you have root words, and then it's actually quite interesting if you ever want to read up on it. But the root word means translate in multiple languages. If I'm not mistaken, like Urdu, Hebrew, I want to say 6 to 10 languages is the same root word. All right, we're going to move along here. I'm going to show you a short video on how to download and sign up on the app as a beneficiary, okay? So let's make sure the volume is.
To sign up for Tarjimly, open up your internet browser and type in Tarjimly, TARJIMLY.org/start. This will automatically take you to your app store where you can download our app. Once the app is downloaded, click Open. Click the blue button that says Sign Up to register, then click I need a translator.
I'm going to pause here just because I've had way too many people click the second option and then sign up to be volunteers to translate for us. So please click I need a translator and not I want to translate for people. So I need a translator means that you're going to be able to make requests to get connected to somebody. The second option means you are a multilingual person who wants to volunteer with us.
Then click I need a translator. You can sign in using Facebook, your Apple ID, or your email address. If you choose your email address, fill out your first and last name, your email address, and create a password. You will need to confirm your password in order to proceed, and then click Sign Up. Be sure to allow notifications so that we can send you messages when you're connected to a translator. We will also need permission to allow recording so that you can send voice notes. Next, you will need to agree to our community agreement. First, affirming that you are 18 years of age or older. Then, agreeing to not take any translations off of the Tarjimly app. It is also against Tarjimly policy to request or accept any other services other than translation or interpretation. Please think before sharing personal information such as your full name, your social security number, your passport number, or your ID. Tarjimly is made up of a diverse community from around the world, and we do not tolerate any discrimination. Please make sure to respect each other and treat each other well. It's important to make an informed decision as to when you would like to use Tarjimly and when you will need the use of a professional interpreter. Finally, please review our policies and agree to those as well. In order to begin making requests, you will need to open up your inbox of the email you used to register, select the email from Tarjimly, and click the Confirm Email button. We recommend completing your profile as well before requesting your first session. Fill out your name, your gender, your occupation, if any, and your organization, if any. You can also feel free to add your phone number. To make a request, choose the to and from language and click Request Translation. Happy translating!
So I wanted to show you that just to show you the sign up process before we get into some of the confidentiality practices at Tarjimly. So we very much understand that people we are working with a lot of times are vulnerable populations. And so we try to do what we can to protect their data. First of all, conversations are anonymous by default. And if you ask us, if you're saying like, what do you mean by that? We don't share people's last names on the app. So for me, if I were to converse with someone, it would say Sara. And then if I'm conversing with Ahmed, it'll say Sara Ahmed. We don't share any other information unless you choose to put a profile picture. Otherwise, everything else is kept secret. So your last name, even your phone number. So if you make an internet call on the app, it's an internet call through an internet number, which if you think about it, it's kind of like if you call your Uber driver, how your number doesn't show up and then their number doesn't show up, it reroutes through another number. That's what happens with this as well. So really what you choose to share in terms of your personal information is up to you at the end of the day. Also, your data is safe with us. We don't package, sell, share, do anything with data that you have on the app. Another thing is that all communications, excuse me?
Can she hear me?
Yes, just
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought you had a question. So now communications are encrypted at rest and in transit. And as a beneficiary or someone requesting translation, we do have on the app a place where you can go back and see all your past sessions. So you can go back if you had something translated and look at it. But on the translator side, that's not available. It's completely erased from their part of the app. So as soon as you end the session, they can't have access to anything, no chats, no nothing. Also, we do, just for safeguarding purposes, which we're going to go over in a second, for safeguarding purposes, we do have records of conversations in our database, but anybody from our team who has access to that has signed a legally binding non-disclosure agreement. We just review them to make sure that first of all, safeguarding, so nothing inappropriate is happening on the app, quality, so reviewing quality of translations, and monitoring any technical issues. Okay, now if you are handling really sensitive conversations and you don't even want us to have those conversations recorded at all, there is an option for no record, but that's available with the premium subscription service, which I won't be going over much today, but at the end I'll tell you another opportunity to learn more about that if you're interested. Today, we're just discussing the free version of the app. So we take oh, I forgot to mention one thing. We're actually in the process of pursuing HIPAA compliance right now. So we're hoping to become HIPAA compliant by March or April. That's just like a little side note there. Safeguarding. We take safeguarding very seriously. We have, for literally over a year, been working on implementing best practices set by the European Union on safeguarding. So through this organization called Keeping Children Safe. We always ask our community to help us with safeguarding. So we have an in-app training for both beneficiaries and translators that's optional to take on safeguarding, types of abuse, how to identify it, how to report things to us, things like that. And then we also have our safeguarding policy readily available in English, and as well as some of our top languages on our website. We also make it very easy to report. I say a translator here because this this is actually targeting you all, but really it's easy for the translator to report you too. The idea is anybody can be reported and we will investigate. If someone's reported twice, they're automatically blacklisted and banned from our app. All right, let's get into best practices. So I want to talk about some best practices before starting a session. I know we went into a little bit into different options for language access. Today's focus is mainly on our free app. However, obviously, I know a lot of your organizations have community translators, and we are honestly huge fans of community translators. If you use them, please keep using them in the way that you can. We just know that that's not an option for a lot of organizations for all of the languages they have. We also know it's not an option to have, you know, a community translator in your pocket all the time. So preparations before starting a session. Make an informed assessment. Now, remember at the start, I said, you know, I'm going to tell you a little bit about some federal laws. Now, there are a couple of federal laws. Oh, whoa, how did I do that? Oh, somebody else did that. Wow, that's impressive. I didn't know you could write on there. Well, all right, I've lost my train of thought. All right, so federal laws that can help you with language justice. There are a couple. The first is any institution that accepts federal funding, but especially healthcare institutions, this is why I'm bringing this up, is mandated to provide an interpreter for you if you need it, okay? So let's say we're like, federal funding, how am I gonna know if they accept federal funding? Do they accept Medicaid? Do they accept Medicare? That's federal funding. So if they accept federal funding, then they are federally mandated to provide an interpreter if you need it. And the reason I bring up healthcare is because a medical interpreter is different than a multilingual who is not trained in medical terms translation. Even a regular interpreter is different from a medical interpreter, because a regular interpreter might be amazing, but doesn't know the word for gallbladder in the other language, right? Or like, you know, spleen, whatever. And so it's really important to advocate for that right when you go to medical facilities. To be completely honest, we have people using Tarjimly for medical things right now. But what we say is like, try to get your medical interpreter if it's a situation where like you can't communicate and you need somebody and you can't get a professional medical interpreter. You know, you're obviously welcome to use our app, but we kind of would prefer that you get a professional that knows medical terminology in that situation. Same thing for court translations or court interpretation. Under you know, US law, you need a court certified interpreter to go into court. So if you're going into court with an interpreter, they need to be a court certified interpreter. All right, let's go on. Oops. Next. Now, setting up your space. I don't know how to remove the if there's a Carol here that drew on here and can do undo, great. If not, you all are going to see a little red thing on here. If it doesn't bother anyone, it doesn't bother me, but we'll just keep going. All right, so setting up your space. First thing, these sound really obvious, but these are best practices when using an interpreter, period, okay? When setting up your space, find a quiet and private spot. You don't know how many sessions we've listened to where it's like the interpreter is trying so hard and there's so much background noise. There are 10 people talking. The interpreter can't figure out like who they're trying to interpret for. So if you, especially if you're like, let's say you're in an office with a bunch of other case managers, try to go to a separate room and close the door. It'll really improve your experience. It'll improve the interpreter's experience as well. Also have a safe and adequate connection. So check the reception. We also see a lot of issues with different people not having adequate reception, and that's specifically if you're using the internet, right, for an app. And if you're using Wi-Fi, we recommend making sure that it's password protected, okay, just for safety reasons. And then make sure you have enough battery to last you through the session. This one obviously is for any interpretation service, but especially for Tarjimly. Depending on your language request, yes, some might take a while to get connected to, but with others, I think you'd be very surprised at how fast you can get connected to somebody. And so we highly recommend making sure you're ready. I'm #1 guilty party here when it comes to using Tarjimly and being like, oh, I want to get connected to someone. Let me just finish this email. And then I'm like, oh no, they've been on there for 5 minutes. And either they're on there and then they're like, oh, this person's not responding, I'm going to end the session. Or they're on there and they're like, hello, hello, and they're still on there, but we've wasted some of their time. All right, moving on to best practices during a session. Okay. This one seems, some of these are going to seem obvious, but I have these best practices for reasons, because they're best practices, but also because we're very data oriented as an organization and we have seen time and time again these issues. So speak clearly. I'm a fast talker and I'm a mumbler. However, when I'm trying to work with an interpreter, I slow myself down and I try to pace myself and enunciate. Okay, for 2 reasons. Or I'll give you an example. I had a session with an organization from Scotland. You're like, yeah, Scotland, they speak English there. I literally could not understand half of what they were saying because they were speaking so fast with a heavy accent, with some colloquial terms, and I was just so focused. I felt afterwards my brain hurt. And so these interpreters, not only can they not see your lips moving, but you know, they're on the phone, there's probably some background noise. So try to pace yourself and enunciate. And it's always best practice to just speak 1 sentence at a time so that they don't have to summarize or remember everything, because they might forget, right? And then your interpretation that you receive, your client receives, is not as accurate, right? Because if you do a paragraph, they're like talk for a minute, they're gonna have to summarize. Oops. Yeah, this is what I was just saying. So giving the interpreter time to translate, pause in between sentences. So say a sentence, pause, allow them to interpret and continue, because that will result in a more accurate interpretation. So best practice is to actually speak to the client, not to the interpreter. It is very natural to want to speak to the interpreter and for the client to want to speak to the interpreter because they share your language, right? It doesn't, you feel kind of weird looking at someone and talking and knowing they can't understand you. But best practices on the app, you do that. And best practices even like in person, you do that. Even the way you set up the chairs, it's so that the interpreter is almost invisible. The interpreter is just there to facilitate the conversation. So for example, we ask that you speak in the first person. And by that, I mean, I'm not gonna on the phone say, tell my interpreter, tell Marta to meet me tomorrow at the office. She needs to bring her papers. No, you would say, Marta, meet me at the office tomorrow and bring your papers. And then the interpreter should interpret in the first person as well. Okay. Now, once you're connected to an interpreter, first for context for this one, the Tarjimly app is used in so many different contexts. So you have resettlement agencies and case managers, you have employment specialists, you have teachers, you have pro bono lawyers, you had people working at the food bank, right? So the situations in which it's used are so diverse that when an interpreter picks up, they don't know what they're getting into. They're going to rely on you to provide that context. So introduce yourself. Again, we recommend keeping it to first names just for confidentiality reasons, but I could say like, hi, my name is Sara. Give them context. Confirm that they're available for the time you need. People are always asking me, is there a certain amount, like a limit to the length of the session? The limit to the length of the session is only tied to the availability of the volunteer you get connected with. Okay. If they're available for half an hour, that's how long you can have. If they're available for 3 hours and you need them that long, go for it. Okay. And then remind the interpreter that the conversation is bound by confidentiality if you're reviewing personal information, okay? If it's a confidential conversation. Now, the interpreter already agreed to our code of conduct to be able to provide you with a service, right? So they agreed to a confidentiality statement, a non-discrimination statement, a self-disclosure statement, but it's always a good reminder. Ask the interpreter to share certain information with the client or the refugee, whomever you're trying to help, okay? So that they feel more prepared. So like, let's say you're on the phone and you put speakerphone and you're talking to this person, the refugee doesn't speak English, they don't know who the other person is, right? So it's just good to explain everything and the context and what's happening. So an example could be like, hi, my name is Sara. I'm here with Marwa, a refugee from Syria. We're conducting an asylum interview. I estimate this will take around 45 minutes. Can you help interpret for us? I'll speak in the first person. Excuse me, I'll speak in the first person to Marwa. And I just want to remind you, all of this is confidential. Okay. And then you can ask the interpreter like, hey, can you just share this information with Marwa? Can you tell her like who you are and that you'll be interpreting for us and that she should speak directly to me and that you'll interpret for her, and just let her know that the conversation is bound by confidentiality. But if it's not necessary, don't share information like her ID number or her date of birth and that sort of stuff if it's not necessary for the conversation. And also that she can let you know if she doesn't understand anything, something specific or whatever. Now, as I told you before, we follow these best practices when it comes to safeguarding. We're working on HIPAA compliance, which is a whole list of requirements in terms of protecting data, and the list goes on, right? However, at the end of the day, nothing is risk-proof. Even if you have an interpreter that you've had for 20 years and they come into the organization and are interpreting for you, you're always incurring a risk. The question is not how to eliminate risk, but it's how can we reduce the risk as much as possible? How can we mitigate it? And so we always say, think before sharing personal or contact information. Okay, so personally identifiable information can be direct or indirect. So direct information could be like your full name, your passport ID, your social security number. It's information that on its own can identify somebody, right? I can just look that up and then I know who that person is. Or indirect, where it's multiple pieces, small pieces of information, when combined, can result in the identity of someone. So like if you have some medical data mixed with someone's date of birth, mixed with something else, you can kind of mix and match the pieces of the puzzle to figure out who somebody is. So before sharing that sort of information, you always want to ask yourself, is it necessary? If the answer to that is yes, which a lot of times it is, you can ask, can I do it in the way that better protects my client's privacy? And if the answer to that is no, I'm doing it the best way. If the answer is yes, do it that way. If the answer is no, just remind the translator of the confidentiality of the interaction as they agree to in our code of conduct. Only share information necessary for effective interpretation or translation. So I just realized I should have probably said this at the start. I keep using the word translation and interpretation, and probably some of you are like, I don't understand the difference. Translation is written and interpretation is spoken. Okay, so if it's translation, if you have a document, you get a document translated, you get a conversation interpreted. So we have this document. Try to black out all the personally identifiable information if you want something translated. Okay, if they receive something, a letter or whatever, if you can, obviously sometimes it's not possible, but if you can, and then also, you know, if you're sharing personally identifiable information in general, you know, like I said, just be aware of how much you share and share the minimum amount possible, because at the end of the day, it's you who get to control how much information is shared, because we keep the conversations anonymous. All right, so it's against our policy to interpret outside of the app. Okay, and what that means is if you get connected to somebody, don't go and be like, oh, here's my WhatsApp number. Like, our translators are generally like super nice. They really want to help. They're like a pleasure to deal with. And sometimes they get a little overzealous and they're like, oh my gosh, if you need anything, here's my number and call me. And we're like, that's not a good idea. It sounds really sweet. It sounds very kind and the intentions are great. However, at the end of the day, like, we're trying to protect our community, and we can only do that if you stay on the app, right? With our safeguarding policies, our data protection. Once you leave the app, that's no longer there. Okay, so we do this to protect you all and to protect the translator community as well. Do not request or accept other services, even if offered. Again, this goes back to generosity and the generosity of our interpreters, who are like, oh my gosh, like I'll teach them English, I'll be their tutor or whatever. It's very kind, but we are an interpretation app. We're a translation app, which means we need to stick to that so that it can become a professional tool that people use and can rely on. If people are exchanging stuff, first of all, it compromises the safety of the people using the app. Second of all, it does more harm than good at the end of the day. And this is a general one. So this is the don't do not request or accept other services from interpreters. I think it's generally a good thing, even with regular interpreters who are not on our app, but I'll leave that up to you. This next one applies across the board. Like if you have your community interpreter, if you're using another service, like another remote phone service, if you're using our app, don't ask them for their opinions or advice. They're supposed to be neutral parties. Like I said before, they're trying to make themselves as invisible as possible. So asking them for their advice, even if it seems benign, like what cell phone carrier do you think that Marwa should use? Like, that's not their position. They're just there to provide interpretation. And especially don't ask them things regarding their political, religious, moral convictions and beliefs. For multiple reasons, but a big reason is like refugees often come from war-torn places. War-torn places have differences in opinions and different sides. And so you really don't want to get into that. We just have people in the app who want to help and people who need language access. All right, I'm going to share this video on how to use Tarjimly's free features. It's going to walk you through how to connect to an interpreter, how to use the text feature, the phone call feature, the photo feature, and the voice note feature.
This is a mini tutorial on how to use the Tarjimly app. First, open the Tarjimly app, make a selection of the language pairing of your choice, and click Request Translation. Our technology will begin reaching out to volunteers that match the requirements that you selected. Please be patient and wait at least 2 minutes to be connected to someone. Once you're matched with a volunteer translator, we'll connect you in a session where you can text, send voice notes, send photos, or get on an internet call. We recommend introducing yourself, providing context, and if you'd like to get on a call, requesting so. Once you receive the OK to call from the translator, press the phone icon in the upper right-hand corner. This will begin ringing on the translator's side until they answer. If you'd like the volunteer interpreter to facilitate a conversation between you and somebody else, you can click the speaker button. Once done, click the phone red icon to hang up. This will not end the session, but will take you back to the conversation screen. You can also use the app to translate text. Just use the text box to request a translation. It's important to allow the translator time to translate the text, noting that you can always close the app without ending the session, and you'll receive a notification when the translator messages back. If you receive a document in a language you don't understand, you can always use Tarjimly to either have the document translated or have the translator explain the content of the document in a voice note. To share a photo of the document, click the camera icon in the lower left-hand corner to take a live shot of the document itself. You can also press the icon of the photograph in the lower left-hand corner to attach a photograph already in your photo library. To send a voice note, select the microphone icon in the lower right-hand corner, begin to record, and when you're done, press it again. Tarjimly sessions stay open for 12 hours if they are not manually ended. To end a session, click the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner and click End Conversation. If you have issues with your translator, you can also select the second option and report the person. Once you end the session, please rate it, selecting Great if the session went well and Problems if you had any issues. Happy translating!
So that's how to use the free features on the app. Just so you know, if you do get a text translated, you can always, just like in other applications, hold until the copy symbol comes up, click copy, and then go to any application you need and then hold in the text space and click paste. So if you're trying to communicate back and forth with a client you're serving, for example. Another thing that is not available right now, but we're hoping in the next couple of months will become available, is the ability to forward voice notes to other applications. The same method, like holding forward, and then you can forward it out to another application.
This is a mini
I never can figure out how to change screens without the video playing again. All right, so now I want to tell you a little bit more about how to share Tarjimly with your clients. If you would like to share Tarjimly with your non-English speaking clients, we do have some instructional pages, okay? that explain how to do it. So it talks about where to go, how to download it, what to press. And so everything's in the other language except for like start translation or whatever, because they will need to identify what it looks like in English to press the button. Otherwise, it's in their language. Most of these come with best practices as well, which cover a lot of the best practices we covered, except we're a little bit more black and white and less nuanced in a couple of them, and I'll explain why. As someone who's worked with refugees and immigrants, they are often so used to having to share all the information to get access to services that they tend to overshare certain stuff. And so instead of saying like, think before sharing personally identifiable information, we're just like, don't share personally identifiable information on the app. And that's just a way to make sure, because we don't have time to sit and explain to them best practices. However, we are actually collaborating as an organization with the Afghan American Community Organization to create 2 workshops, one in Dari and one in Pashto, on how to download and use the app, as well as how the best practices. So similar to today's, but in Dari and Pashto, all the slides are translating. The person's going to be speaking in the language. I will be sending out an invite to partner organizations. So maybe Reestablish Richmond can share that as well. And then we'll record it as well and upload it to YouTube for them to use. We don't have a date set yet, but once we do, we'll be sending out invites for that, to invite your clients to watch it so they can also get language access. So we have around 12 minutes. I'm going to spend around 2 minutes doing this, just so you all can try it out. I do have a caveat here. I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong, I'm assuming most of you or a lot of you need Dari and Pashto. If our match rates for Dari and Pashto are pretty good, so they're above 80%. So the probability of matching if you make a request is over 80%. However, when 30 people request the same language at once, we have a finite group of volunteers, and so the probability of matching drops. So what I want you to do right now, if you'd like, is to try it out. If you need Dari and Pashto, great. If you're just testing the app, then try another language. Try Spanish, try Arabic, try Farsi, try, I don't know, Swahili, I don't know, whatever language you want to try. The probability of connecting is very language dependent. And then also, 2 things, because I get these questions a lot. When you sign up, it will say premium on top, and that's because you get a 2-week premium trial where you can try out the premium services, which include like conference calling, access to pools of paid interpreters to support languages that we can't find volunteers for, things like that. So don't get confused. You will have access to it for 2 weeks as a trial. So select your language pairing, click request, and then wait to get connected. Okay, once you're gonna get connected, chat with your translator, and then end and rate the session like I showed you in the upper right hand corner, how you can end it. I know I went through this very quickly, but it's because I do want to leave some time for a couple things. One is just to let you know that I'll be presenting at the neighborly chat session on March 30th to go over things in more detail, including some of the premium features, explain how that goes, more questions, and then some of the material that we covered today in case you have colleagues who want to attend as well. So like some best practices, how to download the app, etc. So that's March 30th at 9:30 a.m. EST. And then I wanted to open up the floor for questions while people are trying out the app. If people have questions. Margaret, you can kind of guide me if this is not how you do things also. If I could just like open the floor.
Sarah, I have a question.
Yeah.
And this is probably really basic, and if I try out the app, I'll probably know, but when I'm on the app, is my client not on the app with me? I'm just talking to the translator, and then I'm copying what they say onto like a text where I'm also got the client, or?
Yeah, the answer is yes, the client isn't on the app with the free version. With the free version, you're on the app and the interpreter's on the app. So
Okay.
your options are you can copy and paste text, right? Or let's say your client has a paper and you want to translate it, like understand what it says. You can get a better understanding by having this person help you. If you have a paper you want translated into the client's language, you can have volunteers help you. And then the last option is if you're face to face with your client, then you can get on a phone call and put speakerphone, and then you can have that three-way conversation in person. If you want the client to be remote and to call them, that's a premium feature, which is conference calling, okay? Which you can try out actually, because you have a 2-week trial. And you would do that, basically you get on a call and you'll see a little icon with a person and a plus sign next to it. And if you click that, you just add in their phone number and you click the call button. And basically they'll receive a phone call on their phones, a regular phone call from a US number. So if they answer, you're on the phone, they're on the phone, and the translator's on the phone.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I can't see the chat, so I don't know if people are asking questions, but I did see the number go up. Maybe let me see if I can.
While you're
I can read
checking that, so can you request a particular translator? Let's say you have a really good connection with someone on one day and 3 days later you are with the same client. Can you somehow text or connect with a translator directly?
We don't have that option yet, the reconnecting feature. We are looking into developing it though. But at this point in time, we do not have that option yet, which is good and bad. The good part of that is it's very anonymous. So like I said before, like we're huge fans of the idea of having community interpreters, but if you're in like a small town somewhere and everybody knows everybody and you're discussing personal things, as lovely as you think the translator is, sometimes the client doesn't want the translator to know stuff because they're part of the same community. So, but yes, we don't, the answer is no, but we are looking into developing it in the future.
And how long? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to read you a couple of the things in the chat, but why don't you go ahead?
Well, I just, my other question was, in your tracking of typical chats, how long do they last? I understand they could go for 4 hours if the translator has time, but what's typical?
They're really varied because some people literally get on for 5 minutes and want a quick question, and then some people are on for 2 hours. I would say on average around half an hour.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
This question was from Jan. She said it's asking for the email verification and I had it resent, but there is no email verification email.
I would check your junk mail or spam mail. Sometimes it's sent there. If you still can't find it, I'm going to post my email address actually in the chat, and you can email me if you still can't find it, but check your spam.
Okay. And another one, this is from Rachel. I just tried to download the app, but received an error message that it's not compatible with Android 12.
That's something I forgot to mention. That's temporary. Basically, it's a long story about Google and Android 12 and the whole shebang. However, we are close to, we're thinking a week or two, we will release the version that is compatible with Android 12. We're sorry. Just be patient and try in like 2 weeks.
And Jan said, there it was, thanks. So
Great. Yay. Okay, wonderful.
Excuse me, can you post again the app for the to get in contact with the interpreters for the languages? Thank you.
Yes. So I'm gonna post here basically on your browser on your phone. You're gonna go to.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're gonna go to Tarjimly. Make sure I don't do a typo. That would be a bad place to do a typo. Tarjimly.org/start. So I just typed it in the chat. So on your browser, your internet browser, you'll go there and you can download the app from there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So
Sarah, we
just
did
a
have
time check, we're 4 minutes before 12, but if you can stay and people can stay, we can stay a little longer. So,
Yeah, I can stay if people have more questions.
We did have a request
Mhm.
to share links to the training videos in the chat.
Yes, Erin, can I send that to you and forward it to people, or they meet, oh, like right now
Yes,
to
of
send the
course.
links?
I can forward it to people after our session.
Okay, I can, if people are also willing to wait, I can go to you. They're on YouTube. They're on our YouTube channel. So if you find Tarjimly on YouTube, you can find all of those videos. I can also share them with Erin. So it's really up to you all how you want to access them, but I can follow up with that. I can also do it now, but you'll just see my screen going back and forth to YouTube. Any other
There
questions?
we go. Helen sent them.
Awesome.
One quick question.
Yes.
So when you dial in, there's no, on the other end, there's no verification that you're who you say you are, or you don't need to give any credentials or anything like that, telling who you are, right? If you're signing into this app, then they trust that you're who you are.
I'm not sure I understand your question, so I'm going to do some reflective listening here. So you're
Yeah.
saying like when you sign into the app.
Yeah,
when-
like
when
if,
you- when-
if I made a call and asked for an interpreter, and there's nothing that the interpreter wouldn't say, now tell me what organization you're with or what.
No. No. But we ask that you provide, you don't have to say the name of your organization, but we think it's good to give context like, hi, my name is Janice. I'm working with an organization to help resettle refugees. We have a new family coming in from Afghanistan, and I'm trying to help them fill out a form. For example, just so that they have certain like context before starting the interpretation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, if any questions, we end the session and they're like, oh, dang it, I had a question and now it's my chance is gone. It's not, because I just typed my email in the little chat box. So be sure to copy and paste that somewhere or write it down. It's very easy. It's my first name at Tarjim. So TARJIM.ly. Okay, so I know it doesn't look like an email address, but it is one. So write that down. And yeah, I hope you all have a good opportunity to use the app and have a good experience.
thank you so much, Sarah. This was wonderful.
Wonderful. Thank you.
informative.
Thank you for inviting me to present. I'll stop my sharing my screen.
And our next session is at 4, from 4 to 5, girls' education in Afghanistan.